Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the episode of Tales from the Brick podcast. Here with me tonight, I have a very special guest. She's heading from Louisville, Kentucky by the way of the stars. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the fastest and youngest rising stars in independent wrestling right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Billie Starkz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to do this episode. You're the very first girl that is on my podcast. So I thought this would be cool to do. So, first question, you're very young. So did you have any issues in going into the gyms, making yourself be trained or something like that?
When I first started, I really had no trouble like starting training. I was very welcomed in the place that I was trained at, but I know like some people frowned upon me getting trained so young. Like I can't even wrestle in my own state because you need a license, you need to be 18. But I trained in Indiana and started wrestling and started traveling, and it was always never really a problem for me. Um, but like then I would try to go work out when I was very young, and then I would have to like have my parents with me or stuff like that. So like I had more trouble trying to get into a gym than get into a wrestling ring.
So your parents were not that supportive, or they just were, I don't know, they made you do this in the end?
My parents were actually like very supportive. Like they both travel with me everywhere.
All right.
Um, and like my mom has always been like, I'll pay for wrestling school if you go to college. Just wrestling school came early.
All right. She did pretty much the same thing that Mick Foley did with the backyarder who sent him a letter like, "Watch my tape," and he was like, "No, I'm not gonna watch your tape until you fucking don't finish college." Yeah, that's a that's a pretty cool thing. Stay in school, kids, as Necrobutcher used to say. By the way, another question that I want to ask you is, you're very popular not only for your, women's matches, but you also do intergender, which is a very popular thing in independent wrestling. Thank God, I suggest. And like 1 year ago, there was a declaration by Cody Rhodes from Elite Wrestling after a custom graphic that saw him against Lufisto for the TNT Championship, the Open Challenge. And she wrote about the intergender wrestling thing. I'm not particularly a fan of intergender wrestling. That's my personal opinion, though. I respect that others do enjoy it. I'm a big fan of women's wrestling, and Lufisto, though, she's universally praised. So that was pretty much that was not a no, but it wasn't even a yes. So how do you think people today can appreciate this style of professional wrestling?
I think people should just appreciate it for another wrestling match, and then there's two competitors competing in a ring. I never wanted like gender to take a role into wrestling. I feel like it should be I get to wrestle another competitor, I get to wrestle another wrestler. And too many people look at it as like it's a guy versus a girl, it's not okay. And at the end of the day, it was our choice to accept that match, and that we should be able to do it if that is our choice. I love intergender wrestling because it gives me new opponents to wrestle. Because there are limited females in wrestling, it's getting better and better, and there's more female talent. But there's always been more males in the business than females.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the latest match you had with Gary J at the Showcase of the Independents showed that you were, you can put your body on the line to surprise the crowd. But was all of that like some kind of a thing to show the people that women can be pretty fucking tough in professional wrestling, or you just, like to have this underdog character?
I think it was another chance to show that, like me as a competitor, I can hold my own against anybody, especially another male or another wrestler who a lot of people had doubts about me going into that match. Um, but at the end of the day, I had a very, very fun time, and that was one of the matches I've been wanting for a while, so I was happy to compete in it.
All right. So this question usually go at the end of the interview, but I'm gonna ask you now since you told me that there are any other competitors that you still want to face so much as the Steve Robo Ginger.
Um, I would love to wrestle Bastard Cassidy. He is from Indianapolis, and I'm really good friends with him. But I love the style that he wrestles, and he's a bigger guy. And then I just am having so much fun with wrestling and meeting different women. But like some girls I would love to wrestle again is like Roxy, Sky Blue. I've been in the ring with so much with Sky, but we've had great matches every time I've been able to wrestle her.
The Blue Sky was Sky Blue, sorry, was the one that went to AEW as well, right? Or
Yeah, she was usually recently doing some dark stuff.
and were you contacted to do some of that? Some of
One more time, I'm sorry.
were you contacted to do some, AEW stuff, or you want to be in that place someday?
I would want to just be wherever I can make a living off of wrestling. So I don't know if that would be AEW, if that's going to be WWE. I don't know where in the world I'm going to end up. Hopefully, it's just me being happy with wrestling.
And that's one of the wisest thing that everyone, as I always say it on my podcast. So, another question. You were a fan since you were a kid, like very, very young, like 4 or 5 years old? And if yes, how did you get in contact with professional wrestling, like the match or the occasion, the show, whatever?
So my stepfather, Mouse, who's a wrestling photographer, introduced me to wrestling, and I kind of just fell in love with it. But during that time, it was like a lot of NXT and WWE. And then I went to my first independent show, which was a D1W show, and that's when it kind of like clicked for me of like, oh, I can actually do this. And then I started going to more independents and meeting people. Then I picked up a camera myself and got into more contact with some people, and I like started to understand, oh, so I need to get trained, then I can do this and that, and it all just kind of fell in place.
Yeah, I saw that you actually took pics on independent show before. Uh, there was like any guy that was you told that actually everyone was so supportive to you, but how many critics did you met both as a photographer and a professional wrestler? Like there were people who were just doubting you for your age or the fact that unfortunately, because there still is this bullshit, you are a woman.
I feel like recently I haven't really had to deal with that. But my father has always been like my biggest critic. Like I can't even be my own biggest critic. He always like is like, oh, with your pictures you can change this. Oh, when you're wrestling, do this, do that. Um, I've never had anybody really doubt me and me realize it, because in my head I kind of just ignore it. Like I take the help that I can get, but if it's just negative, I try to ignore it and keep moving and trying to be better.
Yeah, just taking the best from the suggestion and try not to make the suggestion blaming you or your momentum. That's what you do pretty much. All right, so another question for you, like you didn't since you didn't specify it, there is in particular inspiration, an inspirational person to you to start like doing this. I don't know, like a wrestler or a manager or a referee, anybody that actually inspired you to do professional wrestling thing that you saw and think, all right, I love professional wrestling.
I think like when I first started wrestling, I was very like attracted to Bailey and Finn Balor when they were part of NXT. And then when I started going to the independents, I was like, I my first independent show, I fell in love with like Necro Butcher, even though that's crazy. Like I definitely do not wrestle anything like this man, but I found him so entertaining. And just like the other superstars I mentioned, I was like, this is amazing. I want to be able to make someone feel like the way they make me feel.
Yeah, and I saw that was actually my very first match of yours, the one against Kylie Ray in Black Label Pro, which I thought was pretty good. actually. So that is your kind of wrestling. Like you're a no-no for deathmatch wrestling, which is pretty much the thing that this podcast, treats the most. Like you're not gonna do the deathmatch wrestling in the future, even though it's
Most likely not. Like I think maybe like there's like a teeny tiny chance. But I don't think I would ever really do it because one, I can't do it right now because of how young I am, and I don't want to do it as like soon as I turn 18, I'm gonna go do this because I feel like I need to take care of my body. And I've seen people like I've seen Reed and Murdoch and Pondo and people who've been doing this for years, and I'm like, oh, their bodies are so torn up. I don't want to get caught up in that world.
yeah, you're not. You want to get eventually your scars after your 18th birthday. Like that's what you want to do. Uh, Another question before, because we are almost at the end of this. There are any funny road stories that you have, because you're so young, as I many times stated in this interview. So there's like a father and daughter, or like sister brother stories, or even a sister story that you had on the road, like something that you like to tell the people when they ask you how was your wrestling.
Ooh. So like the road story that like pops into my head is always like this breadstick uh, story. So I went to a show up in Indianapolis, and me and my friends were on the way home, and we stopped at Olive Garden. It was snowing outside. So we eat Olive Garden, we go outside, we start like throwing snow around, we get in the car. I like fall asleep and I wake up. I go into a gas station and I come back out and I like go to lay back down, and this breadstick falls out of my hoodie. And I'm so confused. I'm like, where did this come from? And my friends just look at me as like I take a bite of this breadstick because I'm just sitting here like, it's fine. I'm hungry. But apparently that breadstick was in there from the first time I fell asleep. As I went into the gas station, came back out, and they were like video recording it the entire time, and I did not notice. Um, so basically, I'm an idiot, and I love breadsticks. So it was a good surprise. Also, they like to make fun of me.
Yeah, so they put the breaststick in there. It wasn't you. They just wanted to make you, cringe for something.
They wanted to make fun of me.
Oh my god. Bully can't stand this. Oh my god. So, one last question. There are like some, you told me about independent stars, but there are some major stars that you like to face the most when you go, when and if you go to the big leagues, which I hope.
I would definitely love to wrestle Millie McKenzie. Like I fell in love with her wrestling during the quarantine and a little bit before that. But like I started binge watching her stuff, and I was like, this is who I want to wrestle like. And I found her so entertaining. And then she recently got signed, and I was like, no, I don't have my chance anymore.
Well,
I'm gonna have to wait a few years.
well,
But
I
she's
think
top of the list.
there is always place in and a spot in the UK, and there's also a lot of freedom right there. So I hope you're gonna make it one day. And for those who don't know, Billie Starkz is a work horsewoman. He busts his ass for the business, for our own, for our own entertainment. And there was actually an extra question that I wanted to ask you that I completely forgot because I'm a fucking stoner. Um, like I saw you were at the spring break, and not even in the pre-show. You were against Starboy Charlie, another very talented and very young guy. So I saw the post on Instagram, and you were like, "Oh my God, they're booking me at the Joey Janela spring break," which was actually our spring break. But anyway, he lost. The pussy lost, so it was the Joey Janela spring break.
That's the facts.
So what was your like reaction, and how do you think how much do you think GCW has changed the business? It's like the place to be.
I see it as like one of the top independents today, and how people get so much attention. And me being part of spring break, it just made me like enthusiastic about wrestling. And then also being the opener for spring break, I was like, oh, I'm actually going to have to do a lot. And I ended up having a great time, and just being able to know that I can do wrestling and like be on that big of a stage. And there's still more to come. It's just a great feeling.
That's good. That was actually a pretty good match and a pretty good show. And as a wrestling fan, I can assure you the opener is so important for one to watch. Like if I like the opener, the show itself can't be that, good, which our spring break was, but I watch it like more gladly. That's what I'm gonna do. The opener is very important. So before we end this, you have a brand, the Big Starkz brand, which is actually pretty huge since you're not even 18 years old. But what is this? Explain it to the people on this podcast.
So the Big Starks brand is a brand that me and my dad started over the quarantine. I fell into a little bit of like a depression, which I feel like a lot of people did, just not being able to leave your house and do a lot. And I was missing wrestling. And my dad jokingly put out a tweet that said, "I'm the LeVar Ball of wrestling. If you know who that is, he has a brand called the Baller brand." And someone in the comments was like, "Oh," uh, and made this logo, and we just ran with it. We're like, "Oh, we're gonna print T-shirts. It'll be funny." It was something for us, and then we started like putting our friends in the group, and it just grew from there. Like everybody wanted to be a part of it, and we were just joking. And now it's like this big thing that people are wearing it on AEW and MLW, and I'm like, oh, this is
That's
kind of
huge.
crazy.
That's huge. Can you tell some independents name that are actually making it that you're sponsoring with that are sponsoring your brand? Like I saw Trelamar, but who else?
Trey Lamar's part of it. Calvin Tankman's part of it. Cole Radrick, Top Flight, who's on AEW. And the list gets longer and longer every time we go to different shows and meet people.
That was a global phenomenon. Well, an American phenomenon at least, but I hope it's gonna, spread the most. So this was Billie Starkz, and this is it from the prick. So thank you, Billie, for your time. That was very fun to do, and seriously, like for you who are watching, supporter brand, buy your shirts, and keep watching and supporting professional wrestling, especially independent professional wrestling, because we are under COVID. So they need money, they need fans, they need everything. They need our support. That's what they do. So say goodbye, Billie, and we'll see again. We'll see each other again at the Tales from the Prick podcast.
See you guys soon. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.